Essentialism begins with a problem that feels painfully modern. Too many people are busy all the time, yet still feel like they are not making meaningful progress. They are constantly responding, helping, attending, deciding, switching, and managing, but their energy is spread so thin that they rarely feel fully committed to what matters most. Greg McKeown argues that this is not just a time management problem. It is a deeper problem of priority. According to McKeown, many people live by what he calls the non-essentialist mindset. This mindset assumes that everything is important, that many things must be done right now, and that saying yes to more opportunities automatically creates a better life. But the result is often the opposite. When everything matters, nothing gets the depth, care, or energy it truly deserves. This is why so many people feel stretched in every direction. They are not necessarily lazy or disorganized. Often, they are simply trying to carry too much. They are reacting to other people's priorities, social expectations, workplace demands, and endless options without stepping back to ask the most important question: what is truly essential? McKeown's answer is not to become colder, less ambitious, or less responsible. It is to become more deliberate. Essentialism is the disciplined pursuit of less, but better. It is not about doing nothing. It is about doing the right things intentionally instead of doing everything by default. This idea is powerful because it immediately challenges a cultural assumption. Many people have been taught that success comes from saying yes often, staying available constantly, and keeping every possible door open. But essentialism argues that real progress often comes from elimination. You move forward when you remove the trivial so that the vital can have your best energy. The opening insight of the book is that life improves not simply when you do more, but when you become much more selective. If you do not choose your priorities, other people and outside pressures will choose them for you. That is how people end up living crowded lives that look active on the outside, but feel fragmented on the inside. What makes this book so useful is that it gives people permission to reconsider the entire way they are living. It says that exhaustion is not always a sign of importance. Busyness is not always a sign of value. And saying yes to everything is not proof of commitment. Sometimes it is proof that you have not yet decided what matters most. Essentialism begins by asking the reader to stop measuring life by volume. Instead, it asks them to measure life by contribution. What truly deserves your time? What has the highest value? What will matter most in the long run? Once those questions become serious, life starts to look different. At the heart of essentialism is a simple phrase: less but better. Greg McKeown uses this phrase to define the essentialist mindset. It means refusing the false idea that you must do everything and instead choosing to put more energy into fewer things that matter most. This is important because most people have been conditioned to believe that more is automatically better. More commitments, more options, more connections, more work, more goals, more availability. But McKeown argues that this way of thinking usually leads to diluted effort. You may be doing many things, but you are rarely doing the most important things exceptionally well. The essentialist mindset begins with a different belief. Almost everything is noise, and only a few things are truly vital. This does not mean that most things are bad. It means that they are not equally important. Once you accept that, your job changes. Instead of trying to fit everything in, you begin searching for what is essential and eliminating what is not. This is a major shift because it replaces undisciplined reaction with conscious selection. The non-essentialist asks, "How can I do it all?" The essentialist asks, "What is the highest contribution I can make right now?" That one question changes everything. McKeown wants readers to understand that essentialism is not about casual simplification. It is a disciplined pursuit. It requires thinking carefully, choosing deliberately, and often saying no to things that are good but not best. That is what makes it difficult. The hard part is not usually identifying what matters. The hard part is being willing to remove what does not. This principle matters because it gives people a way out of constant overload. If you no longer believe everything deserves equal attention, you can begin making clearer decisions. You can stop treating your energy as unlimited. You can stop trying to honor every possible option at once. The practical lesson is that better results often come from narrowing your focus. When fewer things compete for your attention, the important things receive more of your full effort. Quality rises when quantity is reduced intelligently. McKeown's deeper point is that essentialism is not about sacrifice for its own sake. It is about strategic trade-offs. You give up the trivial so that the important can flourish. In the end, less but better is not a slogan about doing less work. It is a philosophy about doing more of what truly matters. And once a person starts living by that principle, their life can become not only more productive, but also more peaceful and more meaningful. One of the strongest messages in essentialism is that if you do not decide what matters most, other people will decide for you. Greg McKeown sees this as one of the biggest dangers of modern life. People often assume they are making free choices, but in reality they are responding constantly to demands, expectations, opportunities, and requests created by others. This happens quietly. A workplace rewards availability. Friends expect immediate responses. Social media creates constant exposure to what everyone else is doing. Family responsibilities grow. Good opportunities appear. Small requests pile up. None of these things may seem destructive on their own, but together, they can fill a life so completely that there is no space left for deliberate choice. McKeown wants the reader to notice that a crowded schedule is often not an accident. It is what happens when priorities are not guarded. In the absence of clear selection, the loudest demand tends to win. The most urgent voice takes the space. The person who never defines their essentials ends up serving everyone else's agenda. This is powerful because it shifts the conversation from time management to self-leadership. The real issue is not just that there are too many things to do. The issue is that without clear priorities, a person becomes vulnerable to every outside pull. The practical lesson is that essentialism begins with reclaiming the right to choose. You must decide what your life is for. What work matters most? What relationships deserve real attention? What goals actually align with your values? What obligations are truly yours, and which ones have been accepted out of habit, guilt, or fear? This principle also explains why saying yes too casually is so costly. Every yes is a form of prioritization. When you say yes to something trivial, you may be saying no indirectly to something essential. That is why McKeown treats choice as a serious power. Your life becomes shaped by what you repeatedly agree to. There is also an emotional dimension here. Many people do not prioritize because they fear disappointing others. They want to be helpful, liked, and seen as committed. But McKeown argues that avoiding short-term discomfort often creates long-term regret. A life spent serving every outside demand eventually becomes disconnected from inner purpose. His deeper message is simple and sharp. Choice is unavoidable. Either you choose your priorities, or they are chosen for you. And the longer you postpone that responsibility, the more fragmented your life becomes. In essentialism, real freedom begins when you stop drifting into commitments and start consciously deciding what deserves your limited time and energy. A major idea in essentialism is that people cannot discover what is truly important if they never create space to think. Greg McKeown argues that one of the reasons modern life becomes so cluttered is that people are moving too fast to discern what really matters. They keep reacting, but they rarely pause long enough to evaluate. This matters because essentialism is not guesswork. It requires discernment. You need space to ask deeper questions. What is the highest use of my time? What matters here? What is noise and what is vital? Without reflection, those questions remain unanswered, and life gets filled by default. McKeown sees this lack of space as a serious problem. Many people wear constant busyness as a badge of honor. They assume that if every moment is occupied, they must be important or productive. But this pace often destroys perspective. When there is no room to think, people end up saying yes without evaluation and working without direction. That is why the essentialist protects time for reflection. This may include quiet thinking, journaling, walking, strategic planning, or even simply allowing empty space in the day. These moments are not wasted. They are where clarity is often born. This principle is especially powerful because it defends something modern culture often undervalues: stillness. People are encouraged to stay updated, connected, and constantly in motion. McKeown argues that without quiet space, the signal of what matters gets drowned out by noise. The practical lesson is that if you want a more focused life, you must stop filling every gap. Protect some time that is not already committed. Let yourself think without interruption. Step back from the flood of requests and ask what is actually essential. This is also strategically smart. Better choices save enormous time later. A short period of reflection may prevent months of commitment to the wrong thing. McKeown's point is that a life of contribution requires pauses for clarity. Without those pauses, you may be efficient in the wrong direction. There is also something humanizing in this lesson. A person who never reflects can become reactive and disconnected from themselves. But a person who makes space to think begins living more deliberately. Their decisions become less impulsive and more aligned. In the world of essentialism, space is not laziness. It is one of the conditions that make wise action possible. Sometimes the most productive thing you can do is stop long enough to decide what is truly worth doing. Greg McKeown does not argue that essentialism means becoming narrow-minded or instantly rejecting everything new. In fact, one of the most useful parts of the book is his idea that essentialists explore broadly but select ruthlessly. This balance matters. You need openness in order to discover the best opportunities, but you also need discipline in order to avoid being swallowed by too many of them. Many people make one of two mistakes. Some say yes too quickly to almost everything, which leads to overload. Others never explore enough, which keeps them trapped in a limited view of what matters. McKeown offers a smarter path. Explore options, but do not commit casually. This is important because the essentialist mindset is not about rushing decisions. It is about making better ones. To choose wisely, you often need to gather information, test possibilities, and observe where real value exists. But once the exploration is done, selection must become much more demanding. McKeown suggests using tougher criteria. Instead of asking whether something could be interesting or useful, ask whether it is truly excellent, deeply aligned, or clearly worth the investment. If the answer is not a strong yes, it may be a no. This standard is powerful because it helps protect you from good opportunities that would still distract you from great ones. The world is full of reasonable options. Essentialism teaches that reasonable is not enough. The practical lesson is to create a gap between curiosity and commitment. You can learn about something without immediately agreeing to it. You can explore an opportunity without giving it your energy too soon. This protects your calendar, your focus, and your freedom. This principle also applies to work, projects, partnerships, content, and even personal goals. Explore ideas widely, but only commit where the value is strong enough to justify what must be sacrificed. McKeown's deeper message is that a focused life is not built by closing your eyes to possibility. It is built by being thoughtful enough to distinguish what is merely interesting from what is truly essential. This balance makes essentialism more intelligent than simple minimalism. It does not say reject everything. It says learn widely, observe carefully, and then choose with real discipline. In the end, the quality of your life is shaped not just by what you notice, but by what you finally allow in. Exploration widens awareness, but ruthless selection protects what matters most. One of the most practical and difficult lessons in essentialism is the need to say no. Greg McKeown argues that the ability to say no gracefully, clearly, and consistently is one of the central skills of an essentialist life. Without it, priorities collapse under the weight of other people's requests. This is difficult because many people have emotional resistance to saying no. They fear disappointing others. They want to be seen as helpful, cooperative, generous, or ambitious. They worry that saying no will damage relationships or make them look selfish. So they say yes, even when they know the commitment is not aligned. McKeown wants the reader to understand the hidden cost of that habit. When you say yes to something non-essential, you are not simply adding one more item to your list. You are spending time, energy, and attention that cannot be spent elsewhere. Every yes carries a trade-off. This is why saying no becomes a form of self-respect and strategic clarity. It protects what matters most from being crowded out by what matters less. The book also makes an important distinction. Saying no to a request is not the same as rejecting a person. Mature adults can respect boundaries, and a well-delivered no is often healthier than a resentful or overextended yes. The practical lesson is to build the courage to disappoint people occasionally in order to avoid disappointing your deepest priorities consistently. That may sound harsh, but it reflects reality. If you cannot say no to the trivial, you will eventually say no indirectly to the vital. McKeown encourages readers to be clear and respectful rather than defensive. A simple, direct refusal often works better than a complicated excuse. The goal is not aggression. It is honesty. This principle is especially powerful because it touches every area of life. Work requests, social obligations, meetings, side projects, opportunities, and emotional demands all compete for limited resources. The person who cannot say no ends up fragmented. McKeown's deeper point is that saying no is not negative. It is a way of preserving the ability to say yes fully where it matters most. It creates depth by preventing dilution. In essentialism, the no is not a failure of kindness. It is often a necessary act of alignment. And once a person learns that, they begin to recover energy, focus, and honesty in a powerful way. A major part of Greg McKeown's philosophy is accepting trade-offs. He argues that one of the biggest illusions in modern life is the belief that we can have everything, do everything, and keep every option open without cost. Essentialism challenges that illusion directly. Every choice excludes something else. Time spent here cannot be spent there. Energy invested in one project cannot be invested equally in another. Attention given to one relationship, responsibility, or goal reduces what is available elsewhere. This is not negativity. It is reality. McKeown believes that non-essentialists often try to deny trade-offs. They ask, how can I fit it all in? Essentialists ask the more honest question, what am I willing to give up in order to make room for what matters more? This shift is powerful because it creates maturity. Instead of pretending everything can coexist at the highest level, you begin choosing consciously. You stop making accidental trade-offs and start making deliberate ones. This matters because hidden trade-offs are often the most damaging. A person may think they are saying yes to a new opportunity, but they are also saying no to rest, depth, family time, creative energy, or important long-term work. If those costs remain invisible, life becomes increasingly misaligned. The practical lesson is to make trade-offs explicit. Whenever something new appears, ask what it will displace. What will become harder if you say yes? What important thing loses energy if this enters your life? This question is not meant to make you fearful. It is meant to make you honest. Honest people make better decisions because they see the full price, not just the attractive front end of an opportunity. McKeown's view is liberating because it removes the impossible burden of trying to optimize everything simultaneously. You do not need to pretend you can have it all. You need to choose wisely. This idea also reduces resentment. People often feel trapped by commitments they agreed to without considering the real cost. Once trade-offs are acknowledged up front, commitments become more voluntary and less emotionally draining. McKeown's deeper message is that an essentialist life is not free of sacrifice. It is simply more intentional about what is sacrificed and why. In essentialism, trade-offs are not a problem to eliminate. They're a truth to respect. And once you begin respecting them, your choices become cleaner, wiser, and far more aligned with what matters most. A defining move in essentialism is elimination. Greg McKeown argues that once you identify what matters most, you must begin removing what does not. This is where many people hesitate. They may enjoy the idea of clarity, but they resist the action that clarity requires. Elimination is difficult because non-essential things often look harmless. They may even look good. A side project, another meeting, a social obligation, a digital habit, an extra commitment, or a low-value task may not seem destructive on its own. But McKeown's point is that the problem is accumulation. Small trivialities pile up until they consume the space needed for what is vital. This is why essentialism is not just about choosing what to add. It is equally about choosing what to remove. If your calendar, attention, and energy are full of the merely good, there will be little room left for the truly important. This principle matters because many people want focus without subtraction. They want meaningful work and peace and progress, but they do not want to let go of the clutter that blocks those things. McKeown is clear: if you do not eliminate the trivial, the vital will always struggle to breathe. The practical lesson is to start cutting more deliberately. Which meetings are unnecessary? Which habits consume time without real value? Which obligations continue only because they have been left unquestioned? Which activities feel busy but not important? McKeown's approach here is not careless. He is not telling people to become ruthless for ego. He is telling them to become selective in service of higher contribution. This is especially useful because elimination often creates immediate relief. Space opens up. Mental noise decreases. The day becomes less reactive. And the most important work has a chance to receive better energy. There is also a design principle here. A strong life is not usually created by adding endlessly. It is often created by editing. McKeown's deeper message is that simplification is not loss when it protects what matters most. What looks like subtraction on the surface may actually be the beginning of greater depth, freedom, and excellence. In essentialism, elimination is not a harsh act. It is a caring one. It is how you make room for the things that deserve your best. Greg McKeown sees boundaries as essential to an intentional life. Without boundaries, other people's priorities, requests, and expectations steadily expand into your time. This is not always because others are malicious. Often it happens simply because open space gets filled. If you do not define the limits of what you will do, those limits tend to be defined by demand. This matters because many people think boundaries are restrictive. They worry that limits reduce freedom. McKeown argues the opposite. Good boundaries preserve freedom by protecting what is essential from constant intrusion. A boundary may look like limiting meetings, creating work hours, saying no to certain categories of requests, protecting family time, keeping phone-free time, or deciding in advance what kinds of obligations you will not automatically accept. These choices reduce decision fatigue because they clarify what is and is not available. This principle is powerful because reactive living often begins where boundaries are weak. When everything is negotiable, every new request requires emotional processing. Over time, that creates exhaustion. McKeown wants people to understand that boundaries are not punishment. They are structure. They create the conditions for deeper focus, calmer energy, and more honest commitments. The practical lesson is to identify where your life is being invaded by the non-essential. Where are you too available? Where do you say yes out of guilt? Where have you allowed others to assume access to your time or energy without clear agreement? Once you notice those patterns, boundaries become a tool for redesigning your life. They reduce the pressure of endless accommodation and make space for priorities to become real. This idea also improves relationships in the long run. Weak boundaries often create hidden resentment. Clear boundaries create honesty. People know what to expect, and your yes becomes more meaningful because it is no longer automatic. McKeown's deeper message is that if you do not proactively protect your time, you will spend much of it defending yourself from obligations you never meant to accept. In essentialism, boundaries are not walls against life. They are filters that protect what matters. And the stronger those filters become, the more your life begins reflecting deliberate choice instead of constant outside pressure. One of the smartest ideas in essentialism is that willpower alone is not enough to protect what matters. Greg McKeown emphasizes the importance of routines and systems. If something is truly essential, it should not depend entirely on daily emotional negotiation. This matters because people often assume that clarity is enough. They identify their priorities, feel inspired, and then expect themselves to act consistently just from good intentions. But life is noisy. Stress rises, distractions appear, and old habits return. Without structure, the essential gets pushed aside by the immediate. That is why McKeown encourages building routines that make the right actions easier. A routine reduces the number of decisions you have to make. It creates a path of lower resistance toward what matters most. Examples might include setting a protected writing time every morning, creating regular family rituals, scheduling thinking time, planning meals, turning off notifications during certain hours, or building a weekly review habit. These structures keep the important visible and repeatable. This principle is powerful because it recognizes that discipline works better when the environment and routine support it. You do not need to fight the same battle from scratch every day. McKeown's version of essentialism is not chaotic freedom. It is thoughtful design. Once you know what matters, you should shape your life so that those things happen more naturally. The practical lesson is to ask which essential priorities could be supported by a recurring system. What routine would make this easier? What habit would protect this? What structure would remove friction? This is especially useful because the non-essential often wins through convenience. Distraction is easy. Reactive behavior is easy. Low-value work is easy to slip into. Essential routines counter that drift by giving the vital a built-in place. McKeown's deeper message is that a meaningful life is not held together by occasional heroic effort. It is supported by repeatable patterns that honor what matters. In essentialism, routines are not boring. They are liberating. They help preserve your best energy for your best contributions. And once the right structures are in place, living according to your priorities becomes less fragile and more consistent. Greg McKeown makes an important point that many productive people ignore. If you want to make your highest contribution, you must protect the asset, and the asset is you. This means rest, sleep, health, reflection, and recovery are not luxuries. They are part of the ability to do what matters well. This is an essentialist idea because many non-essentialists sacrifice themselves in the name of doing more. They stay up late, skip breaks, overload their days, and treat exhaustion like proof of dedication. McKeown argues that this is short-sighted. A depleted person cannot consistently contribute at their highest level. This matters because people often frame self-care as self-indulgence. But essentialism presents it differently. If your mind, body, and emotional stability are the instruments through which all contribution happens, then caring for them becomes a serious responsibility. Sleep, for example, is not merely a reward after work. It is part of what makes strong work possible. So is space to think. So is renewal. When you protect your own capacity, you improve the quality of everything that depends on you. This principle is especially powerful in a culture that glorifies overextension. McKeown is pushing back against the idea that burnout is admirable. He wants readers to see that long-term effectiveness requires sustainability. The practical lesson is to stop treating yourself like an unlimited machine. Where are you eroding your own effectiveness by neglecting recovery? What routines would help you protect your energy? What assumptions have made you believe that rest must always come last? There is also an emotional truth here. People who never recover often become reactive, resentful, and less clear. Protecting the asset improves not only output, but presence and judgment. McKeown's deeper message is that the essentialist is not only selective about tasks. They're selective about how they use and restore themselves. They understand that the highest contribution often comes not from constant effort, but from effort applied from a place of strength. In essentialism, protecting yourself is not selfish. It is strategic. The more wisely you preserve your capacity, the more fully you can show up for the things that truly matter. A major application of essentialism is choosing to put the important before the urgent. Greg McKeown knows that if essential work is always delayed until after everything else, it often never receives the best part of your energy. The day gets consumed by immediate requests, shallow tasks, and reactive obligations. This happens because urgent things are louder. They create visible pressure. They demand quick response. Essential things, by contrast, are often quieter. They may be strategic, creative, relational, or long-term. They matter deeply, but they do not always scream for attention. McKeown wants the reader to understand that a non-essentialist schedule usually gives the best hours of the day to the loudest demands. An essentialist schedule protects those hours for the highest contribution. This matters because the order of your day reveals the truth of your priorities. What gets your best energy? What gets what is left over? If your deepest priorities always wait until the end, then they are not really being prioritized. The practical lesson is to identify what is essential and then give it earlier, cleaner, and more protected time. That may mean working on your most important project before opening email. It may mean protecting family time before agreeing to more work. It may mean scheduling creative thinking before administrative tasks take over. This principle is useful because essential work usually requires more attention and less fragmentation. It deserves conditions that support quality. McKeown is also reminding readers that every day is a form of design. If you do not intentionally place the important, the urgent will always take its place. There is a quiet strength in this lesson. It says you do not need to wait until life becomes less busy to honor what matters. You need to put what matters in a position where busyness cannot easily erase it. McKeown's deeper message is that essentialism must become visible in the way time is arranged. Otherwise, it remains only a philosophy, not a practice. In the end, doing the most important thing first is not just a productivity trick. It is a declaration that your highest priorities deserve your highest quality attention, not the leftovers after everything else has taken its share. Greg McKeown emphasizes that essentialism is not about dramatic reinvention every day. It is about making steady progress on the right things. Once the non-essential has been removed, consistent small wins begin to matter far more. This is important because many people assume that focusing on fewer things should create giant breakthroughs immediately. But often, the real power of essentialism is quieter. It allows meaningful progress to compound because energy is no longer scattered across too many fronts. When a person is trying to do everything, even small progress feels difficult because attention is constantly switching. But when the essential becomes clear, repeated action becomes easier. The path has fewer distractions, fewer competing priorities, and less internal conflict. McKeown wants the reader to appreciate the strength of momentum. Small, consistent advances on important work often outperform bursts of effort on dozens of competing commitments. This is one reason less, but better works so well in practice. The practical lesson is to stop measuring success only by dramatic expansion. Ask instead whether you are moving steadily in the right direction. Are the things that matter most receiving regular progress? Are you building depth over time? This idea is especially helpful because it reduces the pressure to transform everything at once. You do not need to fix your whole life in 1 week. You need to keep removing noise and taking the next meaningful step on what matters. There is also a psychological advantage here. Small wins create encouragement. They build evidence that focus is working. They reinforce the value of your choices. McKeown's philosophy is realistic. He understands that essentialism is not one giant no followed by one giant yes. It is an ongoing series of decisions and actions that slowly shape a more intentional life. His deeper message is that when energy is concentrated, progress becomes more visible and more sustainable. You no longer feel like you are spinning in place. In essentialism, greatness is not usually the result of doing more than everyone else. It is often the result of doing fewer things with more consistency, more care, and more direction. And that is why small wins in the right direction can become so powerful over time. A key lesson in essentialism is that this is not a one-time cleanup project. Greg McKeown is not simply offering a weekend declutter or a temporary productivity reset. He is describing a way of living, a mindset and practice that must be returned to again and again. This matters because life keeps generating noise. New opportunities appear. New obligations emerge. New technologies create new distractions. Old habits return. Social expectations shift. If essentialism were only a one-time decision, the clutter would soon come back. That is why McKeown treats essentialism as a discipline. It is a repeated choice to pause, discern, eliminate, and protect. A person does not become an essentialist once and for all. They keep practicing essentialist thinking in response to changing life conditions. This principle is powerful because it removes the fantasy of a permanently finished system. Instead of expecting life to stay simple automatically, you accept that simplicity must be actively maintained. The practical lesson is to build regular moments of reevaluation. What has entered your life recently? What is no longer essential? What is quietly crowding out your priorities again? What boundaries need to be restored? This makes essentialism dynamic rather than rigid. It is not about shrinking life endlessly. It is about staying aligned over time. McKeown also shows that each new season of life may require a fresh definition of what is essential. What mattered most last year may not be the same as what matters now. Essentialism requires honesty, not stubbornness. There is something freeing about this. It means you do not need a perfect permanent formula. You need an ongoing commitment to deliberate choice. McKeown's deeper point is that the world will always try to pull you toward the non-essential. That pressure does not disappear. What changes is your ability to respond more consciously. In the end, essentialism works not because it gives one magical answer, but because it teaches a repeated process. Pause, evaluate, choose, and remove. That process can guide a person through work, relationships, leadership, creativity, and daily life. It is not a temporary fix. It is a lifelong practice of remembering that your time and energy are limited, and therefore too valuable to be spent without intention. As essentialism develops, it becomes clear that Greg McKeown is promising more than efficiency. He is pointing toward a different quality of life. A life that feels lighter, calmer, more honest, and more meaningful because it is built around what truly matters instead of around endless reaction. This is important because many people initially approach the book looking for productivity help. And they do find that. But the deeper reward of essentialism is emotional and existential. A person who stops trying to do everything often feels a new kind of relief. They are no longer carrying as many hidden trade-offs. They are no longer saying yes resentfully. They are no longer losing their best energy to triviality as often. A lighter life is not an empty life. It is a more intentional one. It contains fewer distractions, fewer automatic commitments, and more room for contribution, rest, creativity, and presence. McKeown wants the reader to see that essentialism does not make life smaller in the way people fear. It often makes life richer. When attention is no longer fractured, experiences deepen. Work improves. Relationships become more present. Important goals move forward. This principle matters because it reminds people that the purpose of simplification is not austerity. It is freedom. The freedom to bring more of yourself to what matters and less of yourself to what does not. The practical lesson is to notice not only what essentialism helps you produce, but also how it helps you feel. Less rushed. Less fragmented. Less resentful. More aligned. more present, more committed. There is also a quiet dignity in this reward. A person who lives essentially often appears calmer because they are no longer trying to serve every demand equally. Their energy has direction. McKeown's deeper message is that life becomes better when it becomes truer. Not fuller in volume, but fuller in meaning. In essentialism, the goal is not to fit more into the day. It is to make sure the day contains more of what matters. And when that begins to happen consistently, the result is not only greater effectiveness. It is a life that feels more like your own. By the end of Essentialism, Greg McKeown's message becomes unmistakably clear. Life improves when you choose the vital few and let the rest go. This sounds simple, but it challenges almost everything about how modern people are taught to live. They're encouraged to keep options open, stay endlessly available, maximize every opportunity, and say yes to more. McKeown offers a different path: choose deliberately, eliminate aggressively, and focus deeply. All the major ideas of the book support this conclusion. Not everything is equally important. Trade-offs are real. Space for reflection is necessary. Saying no is essential. Boundaries protect priorities. Routines make the important easier. Progress comes from consistent attention to the right things. A lighter life can become a richer life. Together, these lessons form more than a productivity method. They form a philosophy of disciplined choice. Stop asking how to do everything. Start asking what is absolutely worth doing. Stop letting urgency define your days. Start protecting the vital. Stop measuring success by how many things you touch. Start measuring it by the depth and quality of your contribution. For anyone listening to this summary, the practical takeaway is clear. Identify what matters most in this season of your life. Remove what weakens those priorities. Say no more often to the merely good. Protect your time more intentionally. Build routines that support your highest contribution. Give your best energy to fewer things. You do not need to transform your life overnight, but you do need to stop pretending that everything can matter equally. It cannot. And the sooner you accept that truth, the more energy returns to you. This is what makes essentialism so powerful. It does not flatter the reader with the fantasy that they can do it all. It respects them enough to tell the truth. Life gets better when it gets more focused. In the end, essentialism is not about losing options. It is about gaining alignment. It is about reclaiming your ability to choose what deserves your life. And once you begin living that way, you discover that saying no to the trivial is often how you finally say yes to what is most important. That is the final lesson of the book. Choose the vital few. Let the rest go. And build a life where what matters most actually has room to matter.